When someone plays with your heart, it leaves a mark deeper than most people realize. It's not just the betrayal. It's the feeling that your love, time, and energy were toyed with like they meant nothing. You start to question your worth, replay every conversation, and wonder how you didn't see it coming. But here's the truth. His behavior says far more about him than it ever will about you. And the best revenge? It's not petty, it's not loud, it's powerful, silent self-respect. This isn't about making him suffer. It's about making sure you never suffer like that again. If he played with you, let him regret it. Not through drama, but through your transformation. Because nothing stings more than realizing the person you once took for granted became completely untouchable. When someone plays with your emotions, sending mixed signals, offering crumbs of affection, making promises they never intended to keep, the most powerful thing you can do is cut the cord. That means removing their access to you, emotionally, physically, digitally. This is not about being dramatic. It's not about proving a point. It's about reclaiming your self-respect and choosing peace over chaos. The moment you decide that this person no longer deserves a front row seat in your life, you stop feeding the dynamic that gave him control in the first place. People who play with others usually do so because they've learned they can get away with it. They rely on your hope, your forgiveness, and your desire to see the good in them. They know exactly what to say to reel you back in the moment you pull away. They live off that power. And the more they sense you still care, still wait for their messages, still stalk their social media, still respond when they reach out, the more they keep the game going. They don't have to be consistent because your attention has become so predictable. That's why the moment you go silent, truly silent, they start to notice. Because you're no longer participating in the emotional tug of war. Cutting the cord doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care enough about yourself to stop allowing someone to emotionally manipulate you. It means recognizing that love should never feel like a game of control or confusion. You stop giving him space in your mind. Stop rehearsing imaginary conversations and stop reacting to his breadcrumbs. You stop answering texts that come in at 11 p.m. and you stop keeping the door cracked open for what if. The closure you're looking for doesn't come from him changing, it comes from you refusing to engage. When you remove access, you force the other person to feel the absence of your energy. And make no mistake, your energy is powerful. He may not have respected it when he had it, but he'll feel the void when it's gone. And not because you told him to, not because you made a dramatic exit, but because you quietly left the stage. That's when regret starts to brew, not when you beg or plead or explain, but when you vanish. It creates space for him to realize what he's lost without you needing to orchestrate it. You're not doing this for revenge. You're doing this because your peace matters more than his attention. Every time you choose not to reply, not to watch his stories, not to fall back into old habits, you reinforce your own value. You prove to yourself that you don't need validation from someone who failed to value you in the first place. And with every boundary you enforce, you strengthen your emotional immune system. You start to see things clearly, not through the lens of potential, but through the reality of behavior. This is how you begin the healing process, not by hoping he changes, but by changing how you show up, by refusing to be an option, by being unavailable for games, by showing up for yourself in the ways he never could. And ironically, the more you pull back, the more magnetic you become, not because you're trying to be, but because someone who respects herself becomes impossible to ignore. He may regret what he lost, but by then, you'll be too far gone to care. After someone has played with your emotions, your first instinct might be to show them what they missed out on, to post pictures of your best self online, to seem happy and unbothered, to make it look like you're thriving just to trigger a reaction. But here's the truth. Real evolution doesn't happen in front of an audience. It happens in silence, in solitude, in the quiet moments when no one is watching. The most powerful transformation you'll ever make won't be for him, it will be for you. Upgrading in private is the opposite of trying to make someone regret losing you by performing happiness. You're not trying to prove that you're over it. You are over it. And that shift is everything. When you evolve in silence, your motivation changes. You stop acting from pain and start building from purpose. Your glow up isn't a revenge plan. it's a healing plan. You're no longer chasing validation, likes, or attention. You're investing in peace, clarity, and a future that has nothing to do with him. When you move quietly, you protect your process. No one needs to know how many nights you cried, how hard you've been working, or how many times you had to drag yourself out of bed just to show up for yourself. It's none of their business, because your progress isn't for public consumption, it's sacred. And the less people know, the stronger you become. You're not distracted by reactions or applause. You're fully in your lane, focused on becoming the version of yourself that you admire. And while you're doing that, while you're evolving, healing, learning, creating, and growing, something powerful starts to happen. You begin to outgrow the version of yourself who tolerated someone who didn't treat you right. You begin to see just how much you were shrinking in that relationship just to keep the peace or keep his attention. And when you realize that, regret stops being the goal. The goal becomes freedom, self-mastery, wholeness. You become so committed to your new standard that the idea of going back to someone who mishandled you feels ridiculous. Here's the ironic part. When you evolve in silence, the change becomes undeniable. You don't need to say a word. You don't need to show off or send signals. One day, if he happens to look back, he won't recognize the woman he once had access to. He won't be able to trace the steps of your growth because you didn't leave breadcrumbs. You just vanished and re-emerged as a woman who would never entertain his kind of behavior again. That's not revenge, that's power. This kind of growth doesn't come from pretending to be okay. It comes from facing your pain head on, deciding that the cycle ends with you, and making daily choices that align with who you really are, not who you had to become to be loved by someone emotionally unavailable. You don't wait to be seen anymore. You see yourself. You acknowledge your effort, your resilience, your heart, and the more you do that, the less room there is for anyone who does. So while he's waiting for you to break, to reach out, to play the same old game, you're becoming someone unrecognizable to that version of your past. Someone grounded, whole, and emotionally unavailable to dysfunction. That's the part he'll regret, not just that he lost you, but that he never even took the time to know the woman you were becoming. And by the time he notices, he won't even know where to find her. There's a moment after the heartbreak, after the silence, after the long nights of overthinking, when you realize you were starving for attention from someone who was never truly present with you. And in that moment, you see it clearly. What you craved wasn't love. It was the illusion of being seen. He gave you just enough to keep you hoping, but never enough to truly feel secure. It wasn't affection, it was distraction. And now you get to change the game, not by chasing more attention, but by choosing intention in every area of your life. Attention feels good in the short term. It's the late night text that says, I miss you. It's the Instagram like 2 weeks after he disappeared. It's the phone call out of nowhere just when you were starting to move on. But attention doesn't equal effort. It doesn't equal investment, and it definitely doesn't equal love. When you stop measuring your worth by how much attention you're getting and start asking yourself whether someone is showing up with real intention, you stop falling for moments and start looking for patterns. You stop needing the thrill of being wanted and start demanding the security of being valued. This isn't just about relationships, it's about your whole life. It's about how you use your time, where you place your focus, and what energy you allow into your world. When you begin living intentionally, you no longer have space for people who are unsure about you. You no longer engage with men who breadcrumb you into emotional confusion. Instead, you become someone who knows what she brings to the table and has no interest in proving it to anyone who can't see it on their own. Replacing attention with intention means being radically honest with yourself. You start asking, why am I drawn to this person? Is it because they make you feel safe and seen, or because they're unpredictable and you confuse anxiety with passion? You begin to understand the difference between someone liking you and someone who's ready to build with you. The former might give you butterflies, the latter gives you peace. When you live intentionally, you stop performing. You stop trying to be the cool girl who's unbothered by inconsistent behavior. You stop laughing off red flags because you're scared of seeming too emotional. You embrace your standards. You get clear about what you want, not just from a partner, but from life. And because you're no longer willing to negotiate your values just to feel chosen, you naturally repel anyone who isn't serious. The beauty of choosing intention is that it rewires your entire experience of relationships. You stop looking for closure from the wrong people because you're no longer chasing empty validation. You no longer mistake a spark for substance. You no longer fantasize about potential. You're grounded in the present, in reality, in what's actually being offered, not what you hope will change one day. And in that clarity, you find your power. And here's the beautiful twist. When you live with intention, your energy becomes magnetic, not in a desperate, performative way, but in a grounded, self-assured way. People sense when you're not looking to be filled by anyone else. They feel it when you're whole on your own. And the man who once played games with you, he'll notice. Not because you went out of your way to show him, but because you stopped needing him altogether. Your detachment will say everything your words don't need to. He'll regret taking your attention for granted when he sees you only offer it to those who show up with true intention. There's a point where words become meaningless. You've already explained yourself. You've already asked for clarity. You've tried to communicate your needs, your feelings, your hurt. And he heard you, but not really. He listened just enough to respond, not enough to change. That's when you realize the most powerful statement you'll ever make isn't with your voice, it's with your absence. Stop trying to make him understand. You don't need to keep justifying your pain, your decisions, or your standards to someone who wasn't willing to meet them in the first place. If he didn't take you seriously when you were present, he doesn't deserve the privilege of your words when you're gone. There's a kind of dignity that comes from silence. Not cold, punishing silence, but firm, calm, detached. It's the silence that says you had my attention, you had my care, you lost it. And that silence echoes in a way words never could. When you keep explaining, what you're really doing is trying to give him a chance to change the story. You're hoping that if you just phrase it differently, he'll finally get it. But someone who didn't respect your words the first 10 times isn't going to suddenly transform on the 11th. The truth is, if he was capable of stepping up in the ways you needed, he would have already. And your willingness to keep explaining only teaches him that he can disrespect your boundaries and still get access to your heart. Letting your absence speak is an act of emotional discipline. It means resisting the urge to send that final message. It means deleting the paragraph you wrote at 2 a.m., trying to explain why you're walking away. It means trusting that if someone doesn't value your presence, they're not going to learn to value it through another explanation. They're going to feel it when it's gone. You don't need to be cruel. You don't need to be passive-aggressive. You just need to be done. And here's the shift. You stop seeking understanding from him and start seeking peace for yourself. You turn that energy inward. You journal it. You process it. You talk to people who actually care to understand you. And in doing so, you begin to realize how much power you gave to someone who wasn't equipped to hold it. You start to forgive yourself, not for loving him, but for expecting more than he could give. And from that forgiveness, you step into clarity. You stop needing him to acknowledge your pain because you acknowledge it. And that's enough. The moment you stop trying to teach someone how to treat you is the moment you reclaim your time, your energy, and your worth. It's not your job to raise him emotionally. It's not your responsibility to keep explaining what respect looks like. If he truly cared, he would have already asked himself what he could do better. And if he didn't, your silence becomes the answer. Your absence becomes the consequence. And eventually that absence will register. Maybe not today, maybe not next week, but one day, when the noise in his life quiets down, he'll notice the space you used to fill. He'll reach for the comfort of your words and find only silence. He'll want the access he used to take for granted and realize it's gone. And by then, it won't be about whether or not he regrets it. It'll be about the fact that you're no longer the woman who waits to be understood. You're the woman who understands herself. And that's the version of you he'll never get back. It's so easy to get stuck in nostalgia, to lie in bed and replay the highlights reel of your relationship. That one weekend where things felt perfect. That night he looked at you like you were the only person in the room. Those texts that made your heart race. Your brain will do everything it can to protect your heart from pain, even if that means painting over the red flags with rose-colored memories. But here's the hard truth. The version of the relationship you're clinging to might have only existed in your hopes, not in the reality of how he treated you. Romanticizing the past is like rereading the same chapter in a book you've already outgrown. You know how it ends, and deep down you know it wasn't a happy ending. But because you're afraid of the unknown, you keep going back to what's familiar. You keep telling yourself that maybe it wasn't that bad. Maybe if you just said something differently or been more patient or less emotional, things would have turned out better. That line of thinking doesn't just trap you in the past, it makes you doubt your own truth. But what if you took all of that energy, the daydreaming, the what ifs, the analyzing, and poured it into building the life you actually want? What if, instead of romanticizing the person who couldn't show up for you, you started romanticizing your future? Not some fantasy version of him, but a future where you're deeply respected, emotionally safe, and fully expressed. A future where you wake up next to someone who brings you peace, not anxiety. Where you don't have to guess how they feel. Where your softness is met with strength, not silence. When you shift your focus to your future, something powerful happens. You stop asking, why didn't he love me enough? And start asking, why did I accept less than I deserved? You stop obsessing over the version of yourself that was trying so hard to be enough for someone else, and you start becoming the version of yourself that doesn't need to beg for love. You begin to imagine what it would feel like to be adored, not tolerated, not almost chosen, but seen and celebrated for exactly who you are. Romanticizing your future also means romanticizing the journey that gets you there, the healing, the glow up, the rediscovery of who you are outside of that relationship. It's not always glamorous. Some days it will feel like 2 steps forward and 5 steps back. But every small decision you make, every boundary you enforce, every time you choose not to reach out, every time you invest in yourself, is a vote for the future you're building. And that version of you, she's not mourning a man who couldn't meet her needs. She's thriving because she finally decided to meet her own. Don't get distracted by the illusion of what could have been. That version of the story only exists in your mind. If he was capable of showing up the way you needed, he would have. And if he ever becomes that man, it will be too late, because you'll have outgrown the girl who would have settled for so little. That's what he'll regret. Not just losing you, but losing access to a future he was never ready for. And you don't need to prove anything to him. You don't need to post about your healing or show him how well you're doing. Just keep building, keep growing, keep falling in love with the life you're creating, because eventually the day will come when you look back, not with longing, but with clarity, and realize the past wasn't something to hold on to. It was the push you needed to become someone who never settles again. When someone exits your life, especially someone you deeply cared for, it's natural to feel like they've taken something from you. Your time, your trust, your energy, your belief in love. And for a while, that loss can feel like a hole in your heart, a space where something used to live. But here's where everything can shift. That space doesn't have to stay empty. His absence doesn't have to be a subtraction. It can become a powerful addition if you let it. Think about it. What if the space he left behind wasn't a void to be mourned, but a room finally cleared for something better? What if, instead of obsessing over what he took, you started asking yourself what he made room for? His absence, painful as it is, creates a powerful invitation for self-discovery, for expansion, for growth that wouldn't have happened if he'd stayed. Sometimes someone walking away is the universe removing what was never solid, never aligned, never meant to stay past the lesson. You get to decide what his absence means. Does it mean you're not lovable? Or does it mean you're being redirected to something higher, something healthier? Does it mean you weren't enough? Or does it mean he was never capable of receiving the depth of love you are offering? The narrative you choose determines how you heal. If you see his departure as a rejection of your worth, you stay stuck. But if you see it as a redirection to your next chapter, you step into power. There's a version of you that doesn't just survive his absence, but uses it. A version that stops checking his feed, stops rereading old messages, and starts asking better questions. What have I learned about myself from this? What standards am I never compromising again? What parts of me did I ignore just to keep him comfortable? That version of you doesn't look at the end as a failure. She sees it as a clearing, a detox, a reset. She uses the pain to refine her focus, to level up, to become unavailable to anyone who shows up half-hearted. The truth is, his absence will only take from your life if you keep giving it meaning that disempowers you. If you see yourself as abandoned, you'll shrink. But if you see yourself as released, you'll rise. He may have exited without apology. He may have left questions unanswered. But that doesn't have to define you. You're allowed to heal without closure. You're allowed to move forward without revenge. The win isn't making him regret losing you. The win is becoming someone who no longer waits for anyone to realize your value. Every time you choose to invest in yourself, instead of chasing his attention, his absence adds something back to you. A little more peace, a little more clarity, a little more strength. You start to rebuild, not just the life you had before, but a new one, designed around you, your dreams, your standards, your rhythm. And in that space he left behind, something extraordinary starts to grow. Self-trust, self-worth, self-love. The very things he could never give you because he hadn't found them in himself. So no, he didn't take your best years. He didn't take your light. He didn't ruin your story. He gave you the contrast you needed to see what you will and won't allow ever again. And that contrast, it's gold. Because when the next man comes along, the one who actually sees you, respects you, and cherishes you, you'll recognize him. Not because he'll be perfect, but because he won't trigger your survival instincts. He'll feel like peace, and you'll only be ready for him because you turned someone's absence into your awakening. At the end of the day, it's not about getting revenge or proving anything to him. It's about reclaiming your power, your worth, and your peace. It's about showing up for yourself in ways you never did before. When you choose to upgrade quietly, replace attention with intention, stop explaining, romanticize your future, and let his absence add to your life, you transform